That last post sounded by the buglers of the Royal Marines and His Majesty the King there laying a wreath. Queen Camilla is in the balcony. Her wreath is going to be laid now by Ollie Plunkett, who is her equerry.
His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales.
Next to lay a wreath is His Royal Highness the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Edward. And he will be taking the salute later on behalf of his brother. Now laying a wreath on behalf of Princess Anne is Lieutenant Colonel Catherine Skinner. Princess Anne is currently on a tour of Australia. And this is the equerry to the Duke of Kent, the oldest member of the royal family. He's called Captain Peter Myburgh.
The Duke of Kent, of course, was 21 years in the Royal Scots Greys.
As Michael said earlier, a change of scene is announced by the playing of Funeral March No. 1 in B flat minor by Beethoven. And this is the moment when the representatives of the political parties lay their wreaths at the cenotaph, beginning with the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer. He'll be followed by the Leader of the Opposition, Amy Badenoch.
this time last year, when Kemi laid the wreath at the cenotaph on behalf of the loyal opposition. It was one of her first duties. She'd just been appointed leader of the Conservative Party, so it was one of her first duties after that date.
Next to lay a wreath is the Right Honourable Sir Ed Davey, the leader of the Liberal Democrats. Earlier, Plaid Cymru and the SNP, the Scottish National Party, take it in turns to lay a wreath. This year it is the role of Liz Saville-Roberts, who is the leader of Plaid Cymru in Westminster, to lay the wreath on behalf of both parties.
She'll be followed by the Democratic Unionist Party. As we discussed before, the convention was nudged in order that the DUP would be able to lay a wreath to make sure that all parts of the United Kingdom were represented in London at this national act of remembrance. The Right Honourable Gavin Robinson MP steps forward.
Just looking at the balcony there with Queen Camilla and the Princess of Wales, clearly decision made not for Prince George to attend. He may be in the background, we don't know that. He was at the Festival of Remembrance last night.
Lindsay Hoyle, or one should say today, should give people all their titles, the Right Honourable Sir Lindsay Hoyle, MP, Speaker of the House of Commons.
And Sir Lindsay often wears, including in the House of Commons, military ties. He has a large collection of ties of regiments of the British Armed Forces.
The House of Lords, represented net in the person of the Right Honourable Lord Montfort. Many years of service in the House of Commons before moving to the House of Lords and becoming the Lord Speaker.
And stepping down next year at the age of 81.
Next to lay a wreath is the Right Honourable Yvette Cooper, MP, Secretary of State for Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Affairs. She has been here, of course, last year in her capacity as Home Secretary. She's joined by her successor there, Shabana Mahmood. They are both laying wreaths together on behalf of the intelligence agencies.
The Foreign Secretary for MI6 and GCHQ, and the Home Secretary for MI5.
It is 16 minutes after 6 o'clock. I'm Nana Akua. We have some breaking news here on GB News. Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC, will announce his resignation this evening amid allegations of bias at the corporation. It is understood in a statement, Tim Davie says, there have been some mistakes made, and as Director General, I have to take ultimate responsibility. Now, of course, the move comes following a torrid week for Britain's national broadcaster after it was accused of airing a doctored clip of a speech by President Trump and failing in its coverage on Gaza and trans issues. Also going, Deborah Turness. Now, she's the broadcaster's CEO of News. She has resigned. Now, this is a breaking story. We'll bring you all of that as and when it happens, and hopefully we'll get the actual resignation speech from Tim Davie as he does so, as we're expecting to hear that very shortly. Now, I can tell you now, I met Tim Davie a little while ago at a spectator party, and I told him, I'm Nana Okoye from GBNews. I work for the BBC. I used to work for you at the BBC, and he said, you make your bed. So joining me now, Josh Howie, who is with me. So this is a big story. The BBC have failed on matters of national and international importance, like getting the bomb wrong about the backfiring bomb that was actually fired by Hamas, like the documentary that they did using a Hamas operative.
Anna, if we use examples, we would literally be here all night. We are talking...
And it's a shame. It's so sad.
Hundreds of pages of misinformation and some outright lies, and some of them, most damning of all, lies they actually knew to be lies. So I used to work at the BBC as well. I have always believed in the BBC ideals, but the fact is they've betrayed it. They've been betraying it now for at least the last 10 years or so, and it's come to this point simply because of hubris, because of arrogance, to believe that they were above criticism. And they have been pointed out on so many issues, on, as you say, on the trans issues, on issues to do with Gaza and Israel. Look, we've got Free Speech Nation a bit. We've got historians are coming in. They went to the BBC in 2022 and they said, look, you've misled the public on a bunch of these historical issues that are being taught to our children. And the BBC said, no, you're just pick and choosy, you're just cherry-picking here. These are from some of the leading historians in the world, and the BBC would not listen. So finally now we have accountability. Is it going to change anything? Is it going to change the culture? Frankly, I don't believe so. Certainly not within BBC News. That is an ideologically captured organisation that we are forced to pay for on pain of going to jail. And I don't see how possibly the news aspect of it certainly can be saved.
Well, there are many broadcasters on there, and some of them are very good. I mean, let's take Maxine Croxall. She raised her eye at the notion that people who have pregnant people is actually a bit of an insult to women. However, 20 people complained. 20 people. You've got half the population who would have... I was offended by being called a pregnant person. It felt like an obliteration of the word woman, yet the complaint was upheld and Maxine's in trouble.
But they're going to be...
Absurd.
People are going to be saying, oh, this is like, you know, right-wing conspiracy. You've seen it online, you've seen it in the press. This is all, like, the right-wing people. They're desperate to get the BBC. You know what? I'm not desperate to get the BBC. As you say, there are many good journalists and great journalists working there. But what I want is a news service, if I'm forced to pay for it, that's just fair, that doesn't lie, and doesn't lie by omission. And unfortunately, that is not what we have.
Well, I mean, let's go live now. Stay right there, Josh. Let's go live to Ben Leo. He's there in Washington, D.C. We spoke to him a little earlier. His show is on at midnight, but I've got to say, so there's been action, Ben, here in the UK, as you've probably heard, as you well know. Tim Davie has resigned alongside Deborah Turness. Of course, they've both gone.
Yes, wow, what a 24 hours, well, 48 hours rather. You know, it was only on Friday that the White House administration here, Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, released that damning statement towards the BBC, calling them a far left, a left propaganda outlet. And now here we are on Sunday with the resignation of not just Tim Davie, Nana and viewers, but also Deborah Turness, who is the CEO of BBC News. Davie, in his statement, which has just been released now on the BBC, says, in these increasingly polarised times, the BBC is of unique value and speaks to the very best of us. It helps make the UK a special place. Overall, it's delivering well, but it's time now, after 20 years at the BBC, to resign and to take ultimate responsibility for what's happened here. I think this is the right decision, Nana, solely because Tim Davie and the BBC chairman Samir Shah knew about this panorama situation with the Trump video 6 months ago, way back in April. It was brought up as a serious issue, and they'd left it until now, until the White House finally said something. It was that exclusive line to the Telegraph newspaper on Friday, which really proved the nail in the coffin for Tim Davie and Deborah Turness, the BBC News CEO. And I just wonder, Nana, we're going to try and get this confirmed now in Washington, D.C. We're working hard to get this confirmed, but I wonder, Did the White House say to the BBC, look, something needs to happen here, somebody needs to fall on their sword because we're not just going to let this slide? Rob Crilly, who is the Daily Telegraph journalist here in Washington, D.C., the Washington correspondent, he told me on The Late Show Live on, I think it was Friday evening, that the BBC's one of their Washington correspondents, they have many here actually because they're so flush with licence fee money, they said Gary O'Donoghue, who's one of the main Washington correspondents, was seen in the White House on Friday, on the day Caroline Levitt, the press secretary, gave that damning statement. I wonder if he was dragged in by the White House for a dressing down, maybe by Caroline Levitt, maybe by President Trump himself. And was it on that occasion that they said to Gary O'Donoghue, the Beebs correspondent, something needs to be done? It's all happened in a whirlwind 48 hours, but we'll try and get that confirmed and some more information for you ahead of the Late Show Live tonight at midnight here in the United States.
All right, yeah, Ben Leo, wow. So thank you very much for that, of course, yes. Ben will hopefully be joining us throughout the hour and his show at midnight. So, Josh Howie, the BBC have been criticised a lot about their coverage in terms of Gaza. And, of course, there was that documentary which they featured a Hamas operative. He was the son of a Hamas operative who was like the narrator. But they failed to tell us about this. All of this has been an embarrassment on the world stage.
Absolutely. I mean, even you have Ben there, but yeah, talking about the White House press secretary, she called out the BBC from the podium, read out a bunch of examples. That I think the example she was talking about was saying they were essentially taking Hamas, a terrorist organisation of Islamists, who were just kind of saying stuff, and the BBC were just repurposing it as facts. So they were sort of like, oh, we've just found 47 people dead, and then it was like constantly renewed until it turned out that they actually couldn't find any people who'd been killed. It's humiliating for the BBC, and it's humiliating for the country, frankly.
And what I have found, because I always flick through all the news channels to see what's going on, and when we were all talking about the economy and the situation we have with the dinghies, the boats, they kept talking about Gaza, and I'm thinking, look, I have sympathy for the people in Gaza, but I want you to focus on what's going on at home. They seem to make the news agenda about other things. We're not interested.
More people were killed in the last week in Sudan than in the entirety of the Gaza-Israel war. Just think about that. How many times has the BBC covered what's happened in Sudan over the last 2 years compared to just the incessant deluge of articles and reports that are coming out from Gaza? That's not to say it's not important, but the fact it's dominated the news like so totally and all foreign affairs. Other things are happening in the world, and when you see what's the evil that's happening in Sudan that has essentially been ignored during this time, that's a failure by the BBC and other news organisations of omission.
All right, well, let's speak to Tom Bauer. Tom Bauer, who joins us now. Of course, he wrote that incredible book, Revenge. Tom Bauer, now, you've been critical of the BBC. What are your thoughts on what has just happened?
Well, I'm delighted because I think Tim Davie was a catastrophe from the moment he was appointed. He was a Pepsi-Cola salesman. He had absolutely no interest and no experience in journalism, let alone making programmes. He'd never made a programme in his life. He was completely adrift and he was just the wrong person for the job. And I think what's happened now is really the right time to actually completely gut the BBC of all those people who have their own agendas which are not in the agenda of truth and the news. And as your correspondent rightly said from Washington, Tim Davie knew for 6 months that Trump documentary was false, and he did nothing. He did nothing because he did the same with the Martin Bashir report on Diana and many other things. He pushed it into the long grass, hoping it would be forgotten. Because in the end, I don't think Tim Davie understood what truth means in journalism, because he has no experience of it. As for Deborah Turness, it was her job to make sure that the BBC was honest and truthful, and repeatedly she failed. She failed throughout the whole Gaza war. She failed on transgender. She failed on so many issues. It has been painful to watch and listen to BBC output, and I talk as somebody who worked for 26 years there, 10 years on Panorama. It has been painful to watch the BBC's standards crash under Tim Davie and under Deborah Turness. So hopefully now they can clean the stables and begin appointing people who know the difference between activism and agendas and the truth and proper reporting. So I've got hope now for tonight. I think it's a wonderful day that Tim Davie has been forced out. And be no doubt about it, he has been forced out. My impression was, talking to people at the BBC and outside the BBC on Friday, that they felt they could get away with just an apology. I think the pressure on Shah, who himself is just as gullible and responsible for what happened on the Trump program, because he was told by Prescott last May the truth, what had happened, how the BBC had distorted the Trump speech, and he also remained silent because he was fearful of change. He did not want change. He did not want to kick Tim Davie out because he felt it would disrupt the negotiations for the renewal of the BBC Charter. But he's been forced to act. So it's a great day for British broadcasting, a great day for the British journalism, and a good day for Britain that finally the BBC has been forced to get rid of these two people who have been literally poisoning the well, rotten leaders, and now hopefully we can rebuild the BBC as it should be, a broadcaster of impeccable world reputation.
But do you think those two people are enough? Because I agree with you, Samir Shah, he knew about it. And also, the people who actually, I think it was October Films who put that together, who edited it? Who edited it?
Well,
those people, I mean, they probably don't have power over those people in another company, but I would like to hear those people being held to account as well.
Well, I agree with you. Of course, October Films bears the primary responsibility because they distorted the film, just like the Hamas film was again outside. But it's down to the BBC commissioning editor to actually supervise what happened. So the BBC executive had to make sure about the truth. No, I think there are a lot of people who've got to go within the BBC. They've got to clear out all the people who believe that their truth is the truth, where in fact is all prejudiced lies. The number of times I've listened to The World at One with Sarah Montague, the number of times I've listened to the Day programme, they're constantly criticizing in the most vituperative way Israelis and giving doctors from Gaza, the UN and all their spokesmen the most outrageous license to tell untruths. And that's got to end. The Today programme has got to be reformed. World at One has got to be reformed. The news has got to be reformed. We need, finally, to get some people in the BBC who know about telling the truth in an impartial way. And that is why today is a great day for all those who believe that what has gone on in the last few years has been an appalling travesty for our national broadcaster.
Yeah, it's very sad because it's gone global simply because of the whole Donald Trump business as well. Thank you very much, Tom Bauer. Really good to talk to you. Thank you for your thoughts. Much appreciated. Oh, joining me still is Josh Howie in the studio. See, now, the other thing that people will look at the BBC is perhaps the investigation of how they investigate their own complaints. You know, they're not even accountable to Ofcom in a sense. Ultimately, they can be, but often they do these things and they say, oh, I'm really sorry, and then nothing to see here.
That's a huge point, and I've got to disagree with your previous guest, with a huge respect to him, and I agree with 99.9% of what he said, but I don't know if it is a great day in terms of it's such a huge monolith organisation. The fact that, you know, Tim Davie's now gone and the head of news, I don't know if that's going to be enough because there are so many people working in so many pivotal points that are ideologically captured who aren't journalists in the traditional sense of you know, actually believing in telling the truth. That's a problem. Again, when we pay for it. Now, people might not like my opinion or your opinion or whoever it is. We obviously have to fulfil Ofcom's rules. But people don't have to watch us and they don't have to pay for us. And they won't go to jail for either of those situations. They should. You should go to jail if you don't watch this channel. But marking your own homework is one of the things that should absolutely go. Why did they get to mark their own homework? Here we are, another news channel, yet everything that happens goes straight to Ofcom. For them, of course they mark their own homework, and mysteriously, they turn out to always be OK. I'm going to talk about an incident that has just bugged me for years now, and I've talked about this before on the channel, and I'm just not going to let it go because it's so frustrating. 4 years ago in Hanukkah, literally this time, I think it was 4 years ago, a bunch of Jewish kids were in Oxford Street and they were giving out donuts and they were attacked by three men who, I believe they were Kurdish, but that hasn't been confirmed, screaming, shouting at them, abuse, whatever. These kids, bunch of teenagers, got on the bus, bunch of geeky, like, Orthodox Jews, and these guys, they were spat at, they were thrown objects at, they were smacking the bus with shoes and everything. They got chased away. And the BBC News reported it, that these kids had said an anti-Muslim slur. Right, because they'd seen this video footage, okay. But what they'd in fact done is say in Hebrew, "Please, someone get help." And the BBC and the Board of British Deputies of British Jews went to the BBC and said, "Look, you made a mistake here. They didn't do an anti-Muslim slur. It wasn't instigated. They're not like there's two sides to this. They are victims of a racist attack," and the BBC just denied it. Denied it outright. The Board of Deputies had to then go and get two of the leading experts in the world they had to pay for to prove and isolate this footage and prove how it says in Hebrew, like, get help, get help. And the BBC, at every step of the way, they could have just gone, you know what, we misheard it, maybe someone made assumptions about two-sidedness, whatever it is, and we're sorry about that. This article is still up there today. They marked themselves, they didn't find it, it then went to Ofcom, and they still didn't find it. I'm glad he's gone.
Well, of course, the BBC are not here to defend themselves. See, there you go. That's what you're meant to do. They taught me that in the BBC guidelines, which they have failed to follow themselves, which is just shocking. But that is how it goes. Let's speak to media executive Danny Cohen, who joins me now. Danny Cohen, your thoughts on what's happened to the BBC. Is it the right move, and should more people go?
Yes, I think it is the right decision. I think it's right that Tim Davie and Deborah Turnus have resigned. I think it's been inevitable from the moment the Prescott report was leaked. It uncovered systemic bias at the BBC. You know, the focus, perhaps understandably to some extent, is on this fake Trump video. But the Prescott report is about a lot more than that. It's about a culture of bias at the BBC and serial failures of impartiality. And most particularly, and this is why it's right that they've resigned, failures of management to effectively address it. So yes, it's the right decision, and I'm glad the BBC can start again.
The problem is that that sounds like a bit of a rotten apple that we haven't quite hit the core of. It feels like we're just bitten off the skin, and it goes deeper than that, because there must have been many chains that particular brief went through before it was passed. Lots of people would have seen it, and lots of people enabled it, and nobody said anything. And those who did was silence. And let's take Martine Croxall as well. Martine Croxall, sorry, what happened with her? I mean, that was ridiculous. She raised an eyebrow at the fact that women have been, well, I don't know, they're trying to eradicate us in terms of pregnant people. And a complaint was upheld. I mean, it's nonsense.
You're right. We're agreeing. There's a series of problems, but I think they have to take this as an opportunity. The BBC has an opportunity now to reform itself, to look itself coldly in the eye, and see how it can and must change if it's going to survive and be trusted by licence fee payers in the future. So, at this point, you know, I'm glad that this decision has been made, but I'd like to also be a little bit optimistic that the BBC can now take this opportunity and reform itself.
What about Ofcom? Do you think that it is now about time that the BBC were not allowed to mark its own homework? Because I think a lot of this comes from that. Because if that had been us on GB News and we had been caught kind of doctoring the clip, and we'll play you the clip in just a bit so you can have a look at it at home if you didn't get a chance to see it. If we had done that, I reckon we'd probably be off air. That would be an off-airable offence, especially if it was on an international level, as that was.
Yes, you're right. I think that the age of the BBC marking its own homework, executives within the BBC writing reports, investigative reports about their bosses at the BBC, it needs to stop. It's been ineffective. It doesn't hold the BBC to account, and independent governance and independent complaint system is long overdue for the BBC.
And what do you think the BBC should become? Because, in my view, the things that they are getting rid of, like local radio, well, that's non-commercial. That's why, if I'm going to pay a licence, I would pay it for those things, where they train journalists and broadcasters. They're very good at training, but they don't seem to be able to follow their own BBC guidelines, which are very, very thorough. Should they be sort of, you know,
listen,
fine-tuned?
I think the BBC's always had the problem of trying to be all things to all people. It's very, very difficult. in an age where funding is not, it's much more than you have on GB News, but it's not as much as they used to have, and they're expected to provide a range of services. But I think you're right. I think they need to focus on their core aims. They need to focus on their core principles, and they need to look themselves in the eye hard and work out how to move on from this and really actually change.
And with regards to the licence fee, because the charter is up for renewal in 2027. A lot of people, there was the piece with Boris Johnson, who said that until Tim Davie goes, he's not going to pay it, so he's now going to be paying it, so he's going to carry on paying it, because Tim Davie said he would go. What, with regard to the licence fee, do you think needs to happen there?
Well, I've always been in favour of the licence fee, but it has to be a licence fee that we all pay because we believe that the standard of service the BBC is providing is worth the licence fee and is worth that special imposition on the British people. So I think the BBC has an important role to play, but it really needs to change. The other thing it really needs to change, by the way, is its reporting on Israel and Hamas, and in particular the BBC Arabic service, which has frankly been a source of anti-Semitism and anti-Israel bias over the last 2 years. It's something I've written about in detail. The BBC has consistently claimed that there was no systemic problem. There clearly is. The Prescott report reveals that there is. And it means that we have evidence now that the BBC has been gaslighting the Jewish community for the last 2 years.
Well, I mean, they weren't prepared to call Hamas a terrorist organisation, which they weren't prepared to call them out for terrorists, and everybody else is prepared to do that. And they seem to be dragging their heels on that, which I just don't understand why they would do that. But they've also had people like Gary Lineker who breached the guidelines, and Tim Davie seemed to change the guidelines to make sure he could do something about Gary, and then kind of ignored them himself, which was odd.
Yes. There was a big problem with Gary Lineker. In the end, he did leave the BBC. I think that was the right thing. And it's just another example of, an approach in the BBC, for people in the BBC, where they've done things which have been very deeply upsetting for the Jewish community.
Yeah, it's disgraceful. Danny Cohen, thank you very much. That's Danny Cohen. He is a media executive. So still with Josh Howie. Josh, yeah, so we're just on the question of people like Gary Lineker, who was able to get away with so much, which was just shocking, and nobody anywhere else in the BBC would get away with it. And I have friends who work for the BBC one of my friends who posted something when Gary Lineker had said something which he found religiously offensive as a Christian. And the bosses took about 5 minutes to get back to my friend and say, take that down about Gary Lineker. It's just shocking.
No, it is shocking. I mean, he put out a post that implied that Jews are rats. I mean, that's Nazi imagery. Reposted it, yeah. So there's hypocrisy, but you expect. So, I don't know, maybe I'm naive, maybe I was raised in a different time, where you look to the BBC for the impartiality. Maybe I'm an ideologue, but I've always, in the past, up until the last couple of years, I've fought for the BBC, I've argued for the BBC. I believe that if it delivered on what it was set out on those Reithian ideals over 100 years ago, then I'm happy to pay that licence fee. But about a year or so ago, I had to stop paying it myself, just in disgust.
But
absolutely.
That's against the law, Josh.
I challenged the BBC, frankly, to send me to jail because I wanted to go to court to prove how they have lied over the last however many years about Jews, and that I shouldn't have to pay for a service that I believe is racist towards my ethnicity. And you've seen the results of that. Look, sorry, I don't know why I'm saying look. I'm not like look, hey. But, a couple of weeks ago, 2 Jews were murdered. The man who did that was shouting, "You're killing children, you're killing children." Now, a few months before that, the BBC are broadcasting to the world that 14,000 babies were going to die within 48 hours of starvation. That was a lie, like an outright lie. That then goes out, and I've got a friend yesterday I was speaking to who lives in New York, and he's using the BBC to make his arguments about Israel. And we can't appreciate how trusted the BBC is even across the world. When the BBC published and put out that Israel had bombed a hospital, this is near the beginning of the war, that started, synagogues were burnt across the world because of that, set alight.
Well, also, Joe Biden cancelled his meeting because of it, didn't he? Because there was going to be a world leaders meeting about Israel. And that was, he cancelled it.
We should be proud of the BBC. It's one of the best, ideally, it's one of the best cultural institutions that we have out there, one of the best advertisements for the UK. But I'm not proud. I haven't been proud for years now of the BBC. And that makes me sad and, frankly, angry. Yes, Tim Davies resigned, but it's got to go deeper than that.
Well, I mean, there was, what's her name, Lola Clark on BBC Radio 2, Death to the IDF. Remember those chants? That went out Glastonbury, which is viewed globally by many, many people, especially on the BBC, a bastion of excellent broadcasting, yet they allowed that to go out. Now, they had cameras all over that place. They could have either muted it, done something, or gone to something else. Of course they would. Whether you support Israel or Hamas or whatever your position is, you're not allowed to be shouting or chanting death to anyone.
Of course, it's incitement. And when you've got, in Israel, they all have to go into the army. When you're saying deaf to the IDF, it's basically saying deaf to all Israelis. They have to do it. Why do they have to do it? Because they've been surrounded over its creation by countries that want to constantly and try to wipe it out. Bob Villan made a very interesting statement in the interview with Louis Theroux. He did a podcast, and he was saying that afterwards they weren't freaking out. No one from the BBC was like, "Oh no, I've messed up, by the way, on this channel," and I'm sure you have as well. And people go bonkers here. Everyone's like, "No, stop saying that, move that." Everyone, because we realised we made a mistake. Right at that time, after he chanted for the death of Israelis, essentially,
it's terrible.
He said hours later, people were coming up to him from the BBC. Say, "Oh well, that was amazing." They didn't realise at all that they'd messed up. It was only later on, when there was a public outcry about it, that suddenly they did. But at the time, that just shows how it fits in with all of those people at every step of the way. There thought that was acceptable,
and that just goes to show the culture, really. If that's going to be acceptable, and if that had been here on GB News again, we would never have been able to broadcast that. If you just tuned in, welcome on board. Just to let you know, Tim Davie has resigned alongside Deborah Turnish from the BBC. Let's play you the clip, because you may not have heard or seen it, but this is the furore. This is literally the final straw. This is how October Films, who were working for the BBC, produced a documentary about the Capitol Hill riots, and this is how they doctored a clip. Which one should we play? Should we play let's play it for you so you can hear the original and how it was changed.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
And he followed that on with "and march peacefully." So he actually used the word peacefully, but somehow, someone, somewhere decided to mash the first clip. The first clip was the doctored clip, and then cut an image in the middle, and then mash it with something else. Fight, fight. And that, you couldn't have fight, fight on its own. So it must be a deliberate move to try and, manipulate the narrative. I mean, that's shocking, right?
It's more than shocking. That's mental. That is just like someone creating... lying, basically. And this is again, a news organisation, any news organisation, ideally, is impartial. And again, we have opinions about stuff, but we at least are open about it. They're presenting that falsehood as truth. Whether you're a fan of, Donald Trump, President Trump, whatever you want to call him, whether you're a fan of his, you should be a fan of truth, of fairness, of impartiality. That's what we as a country surely should stand for, and that's what our national broadcaster should stand for as well. And when they put together a clip like that and deliberately mislead the public, then, frankly, more than Ed Davey needs to resign from that.
Yeah, I think it's
who did that clip?
Tim Davie.
I mean, sorry, Tim Davie. Sorry, I keep on saying it, but I've got it in for Ed Davey as well. No, Tim Davie. But who edited that clip? Who approved it at every step of the way?
October Films, wasn't it?
Yeah.
October. So they, but again, they're an independent provider who BBC have commissioned to do this piece, but it then is overseen by the BBC, and then the BBC broadcast it on their output. So whatever bias that clearly existed, then, obviously that's no good. But now, what I want to show you, because I think it's really important that I do this, is, let's remind you of how all of this started, because it was the Telegraph reporting on the BBC's editing of Trump.
Played the following clip.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell.
But Trump didn't, in fact, say this at all. The BBC spliced together two clips that took place 54 minutes apart. So let's go through it again.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you.
Now, see there, between Capitol and, that's a cut. Here's what Trump actually said.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
It's different. It wasn't until nearly an hour later that he then said the second part of the BBC's version.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we fight. We fight like hell.
I mean, it's really shocking, isn't it? I mean, I don't know what to say, because I'm a fan of the BBC in that they train journalists in an excellent manner, and I'm grateful for that. But I was trained by them not to do that. So it is astonishing that they would allow that and then knowingly continue and let it all play out and then do nothing about it. It's shocking. I think the right thing has happened, but I'm not sure that it's gone deep enough. Well, joining me now is GBNews senior political commentator Nigel Nelson. Well, Nigel, what are your thoughts on this? Because obviously, two people have now resigned.
Yes, indeed. I mean, Tim Davie is gone. Debbie Turner, the head of news, is gone. It shows that finally the BBC have taken this seriously. I mean, what I was saying during the week was that what the BBC had to do was explain itself if there was an explanation for what had happened. Now, that wasn't forthcoming. They just hid behind a no comment on the basis of leaks, and that simply wasn't good enough. So the obvious answer was to go before Parliament's Culture, Media and Sport Committee. Obviously, that process was in train, and now we've had these resignations.
Well, do you know what, Nigel, though, seriously, what do you think needs to happen to the BBC now? Do you think that perhaps it is time for them to be accountable to Ofcom, just like everybody else?
Well, I think we have to see where the next stage goes. But yes, I do actually. I mean, ultimately they are accountable to Ofcom, but of course they've got their internal processes they go through first.
Yeah, but that's not working, is it? I mean, it's not working.
I think that's absolutely. No, you're absolutely right. I think that this particular incident shows it doesn't work, and that's what I mean about last week. That when they simply put out a straightforward statement, wouldn't comment on leaked memos. So what they should have done is come up with an explanation immediately last week, which of course they didn't do. So yes, you're absolutely right. However the internal processes work, they don't.
No, and you know, if that, could you imagine if that had happened on GB News, if we doctored a clip, actually changed the meaning? Because look, as a journalist, we can't play the entire 1 hour, so we might take a bit here, and then we'll say, and the person went on to say, so that we and however we mash it together, the same meaning remains. So you wouldn't change the context, but they actually altered the meaning of it, and the second clip could not have stood alone at all. So they made it flow. And the BBC knew there was a problem with that, and they carried on. Honestly, Nigel, what do you think this has done to the BBC's reputation across the world?
Well, firstly, you're absolutely right. Ofcom would have been all over us if we'd done something like that. And yes, again, you're also right that what should have happened was, if you're going to change something, you explain to the viewer it has been changed. So there's total transparency about it. Now, clearly, as far as the BBC's reputation goes, it had a great reputation across the world. This doesn't help it. And in fact, that I think a lot of people will start to distrust the BBC because of this. And also, the other point, Nana, is we still haven't had an explanation. We still don't know why this happened. They've admitted that it was a mistake. What we don't know is why that mistake was made. Was it deliberate? Was it unintentional?
Well, it was obviously deliberate. Nigel, it couldn't be anything but, because the second part could not have been played on its own, so it flowed. So you couldn't have him fight like hell, because this is kind of what he said after the first bit. So even if you thought, oh, maybe they put two together and they weren't separate statements, it was actually one comment that joined up and then completely altered the meaning. Well, I want to get your view on this, because this is a message posted on social media from Cultural Secretary Lisa Nandy. She said, I want to thank Tim Davie for his service to public broadcasting over many years. He has led the BBC through a period of significant change and helped the organisation to grip the challenges it has faced in recent years. The BBC is one of our most important national institutions. Every day it tells the story of who we are and the people, places and communities that make up life across the UK. Now, more than ever, the need for trusted news and high-quality programming is essential to our democratic and cultural life and our place in the world. And as a government, we will support the board as it manages this transition and ensure that the Charter Review is the catalyst that helps the BBC to adapt to the new era and secures its role at the heart of national life for decades to come. That is from Lisa Nandy. What are your thoughts on those comments?
Well, I mean, more or less, I would agree with Lisa Nandy on what they're trying to achieve. The Charter Review is coming up, so there is a question about the BBC's future finances within that Charter Review, whether the licence fee is the appropriate way of continuing with it. But the most important thing there is it's got to be trustworthy, and this is where the BBC has just let us down. It's quite clear that particular programme wasn't trustworthy. The same thing applies to the one about the documentary they did on Gaza, when again they weren't transparent about who was appearing in that programme. So the important thing is, if the BBC is to work, it has got to be producing trusted, impartial news, neutral news with no political agenda behind it. The Charter Review will obviously go through that, and now it's for the BBC, who are on the back foot, to convince people that they've earned that trust.
Well, it is, and I hear you, but this is very damaging for the BBC because, of course, they've upset Israel. Do you remember the report they did about the bomb that backfired? It was actually launched by Hamas. Immediately, the BBC reported that it had come from Israel. Somebody said, I can only see that it's a bomb that's come from Israel. And then, of course, it was captured at the back of another broadcaster's camera where you could see the bomb taking off and then going backwards. And even then, after that, they were still defiant. And, of course, there was the death to the IDF, which was on Glastonbury, another global event that people would have been watching and, you know, people all across the world would be looking at. I mean, the BBC has problems here. Do you think that more people need to go? Because there's only those two right now.
Yeah, I mean, what we're talking about is this specific case about the Panorama documentary. So that is obviously the reason why Davie and Deborah Turness have gone today.
Well, it's the final straw, really, because remember that report didn't just talk about that. It talked about the handling of climate change. It talked about the trans issues as well. Martine Croxall, who is probably going to be disciplined for calling women women, which I don't know why that should be a punishment, why she should be punished, but she is. It's not just that, it is the final straw.
Well, certainly Martine Croxall shouldn't be sanctioned for what she did. That was perfectly reasonable. And when you're saying it is the last straw, I mean, I think that the question really comes down to whether we want a national broadcaster publicly funded, which is what the BBC is, and that is what the debate will be now, if we actually need that. In my view, I think we do. But the BBC has to do an awful lot better to earn that position in British society.
Well, how about a trimmed-down BBC that just focuses on community initiatives, like, for example, local radio, something that they're getting rid of at a rate of knots, and just doing community-based stuff and just not doing news? Do you think that perhaps they should lay off news?
I'd go the other way around, in fact, that I think that news is really important. And I think that especially the BBC website is an extremely important part of the of news broadcasting. What I do think is the BBC should no longer think about trying to challenge in the commercial sector that means it's cutting back on the light entertainment, which costs a lot of money, and doing things that are public interest broadcaster ought to do, and certainly news should be part of that. But once again, it's got to be news that can be trusted, and what they can't do is keep making these mistakes.
Because I'm not sure people will trust the BBC. Right now, Nigel, very briefly then, do you trust the BBC?
Broadly, yes. Obviously, my trust has taken a knocking after this latest debacle. But broadly, yes, I do.
You do. All right, Nigel Nelson, thank you very much for your thoughts. It's been a pleasure, as ever. That was Nigel Nelson, his thoughts on the BBC. How do you feel about the BBC? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Keep them coming, because we'll continue with the conversation. Two people have left the BBC. Stay tuned, because Free Speech Nation is on the way next, and you'll get more on that.
You could win your entire Christmas on us this year, all magically delivered to you in time for the big day. There's cash, £30,000 in tax-free cash to make your new year go with a bang. There's also a further £10,000 to spend on all the gifts. We've also got Christmas lunch for you, with £1,000 in vouchers to spend at your favourite supermarket. And finally, a festive GBNews goodie bag, so there's something for everyone under the tree. For another chance to win, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB17 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 28th of November. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Bold.
They are under no illusion.
Ray.
Are you a human trafficker?
Boundless. I've had enough of the nonsense, and I'm not afraid to say it.
Don't get us on the BBC.
Every weeknight, I tear through the headlines.
The smell of gasoline. Should we be worried about it?
From Westminster madness to cultural war chaos.
What we're going to do now is they are throwing things out the car as we speak.
Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join